Hi, I'm Steve Barlow. This is the Humanised Workforce Future You podcast video, where we're talking about perceptions of the future, issues that we need to be aware of, and their role in a rapidly changing work and life environment.
Hi, I'm Craig Saffin. The Humanised Workforce Future You podcast series is focused on the key factors evolving to create a more humanised workforce and how people from all walks of life are creating their future selves.
Welcome to the Humanised Workforce Future You podcast. My name's Steve Barlow, and as always, I'm joined by Craig Saffin. So how are you today, Craig?
Good, Steve. It's a busy week. It's a bit chaotic in the business world at the moment. There's a lot of stuff going on, isn't there?
Sure.
Yes. Who have we got today, Steve?
Today we've got with us Cindy Nicholson, who's joining us from Sydney. So welcome to the podcast, Cindy. Do you want to just tell us a little bit about your background and who you are?
Absolutely. Well, first of all, can I just thank you both for the opportunity to be here on your podcast. We just shared that you've just released your 91st one this morning, which is just amazing. So congratulations to you both, Steve and Craig, on that. And it's my honor to be here today. So I really appreciate you reaching out and enabling me to be here with you. I guess a little bit about me. There's not much prep to this. I'm just going to kind of like let it flow. I know that you're very candid and you just want to make it interesting. So hopefully I can be of interest to your audience. Cindy from Sydney, well done for not getting tongue twisted on that, Steve. Often I get Sydney from Sydney, so you did very well. But Cindy from Sydney has only really been around since 1994. So Cindy was originally from the UK. So that's where I was born and grew up. And my career actually started in investment banking. And, we could go on to an old story of, fake it till you make it in regards to that, because I think in those days, London was just filled with opportunity. And if you have the right attitude, the world was your oyster. And for me, my attitude was always keep a positive mindset and take every opportunity that came your way. And that rings true, I think, for my entire life, and what I also, encourage my children and my clients to adopt as well. You are the master of your destiny. You are the one that is going to make that pathway for you. Nobody else is going to do it. So if you've got the right attitude, you absolutely can make it. So in investment banking, it was a really interesting time then, because it was back in the late 80s and we were really getting into a lot of innovative, complex derivative trades. And, obviously further down the track, the monitoring of those has cost us at a global scale quite a big price. But having said that, very, very interesting times. And I think it was always sort of being on that leading edge, the bleeding edge of things. And I always think of my career of having an element of innovation across every sector that I've worked in. So predominantly that was investment banking. Then I was working across both technology and the business side of things, doing a lot of quantitative analysis for new products. And then I moved from JP Morgan over to Credit Suisse Financial Products, which at the time were only 50 people. They were a spin-off of Credit Suisse, going head-to-head with Bankers Trust on their derivatives trading. So very, very high energy, high burnout environment, lots of money floating around, lots of very, very smart people. And I got to, play in that space, probably not achieving so much on the money side, but certainly the experience was worth it. And at that time, there was one trading product that was available in the world. It was called Devon, from a company called SunGard. And very few people knew how to actually use that technology. So I was well averse with that, because I'd implemented it both at JP Morgan and Credit Suisse Financial Products. So off I go on a nice holiday to Australia to visit some friends for a 2-week holiday, and my whole world just completely changed. I fell in love with the country. I said, my goodness, somebody's turned the lights on. Going to work in the dark, coming home in the dark was no longer something that I was attracted to. I loved the country. So I went back to the UK 2 weeks later in floods of tears. And by 6 weeks later, I had sold my car, given up my job, rented out my house, and was back here. And that was the end of that story, basically. Here I still am, almost 30 years later. So, yeah, so what happened from there? I mean, I guess the technology side of it really created a lot of opportunity for me to work in that software space. And I was asked to go and join that technology company. And then with that, I got to travel all over Asia Pacific, which was incredibly exciting for a young person to have all of that travel paid for and to stay in nice hotels and get to experience everything and learn at the same time. So I was incredibly fortunate. 2 years down the track, I was approached by a Silicon Valley technology company. And of course, that was really the hub and the place to be in those days too. So I managed to, I was asked to set up the Australia and New Zealand division of that organisation. And what was really interesting about that was, I think at the time I was probably about 26, 27. And I really did not know what to do. I had no idea. I was in a new country. How do you go about setting up a new business? But what was really interesting about that was that the fellow who had appointed me had the trust in me. He could see the potential in myself that I couldn't see in myself at the time. And so I trusted that, and I stepped into a very uncomfortable space, but it was absolutely amazing. I mean, I worked 100 hours a week. I traveled 75% of the time, spent a lot of time in the Silicon Valley, but we grew that company, and 7 years later it IPO'd. And that was just an incredible journey. In terms of culture, when I talk about what does a startup need to do and what is the best culture, that was a shining example of what to do. So moving on from there, I think that gave me the courage and the confidence to go ahead and set up my own company. And that's when Braintree was established. So we're talking back in 1998. And again, it's really interesting how we thrive around technology in all of our businesses, but there is a human element in all of that. And the human element, in fact, is actually the most important part. So when Braintree was established, the whole purpose of that was to bring the human element into the negotiations between banks and software companies, because each of those parties were negotiating terms that they thought were beneficial to them, but they were only short-term benefits. And so I was really there trying to help make sure that those relationships would work properly and to get those technology solutions implemented. So I guess in a nutshell, over the last 35 years, I've worked across investment banking, management consulting, software technology, and in telco. And in all of those things is a common theme of innovation on everything. The latest permanent role that I had was with Optus and Singtel, and I built a technology platform for doing online digital identity verification, which was game-changing. And I took a real sort of thought leadership role in that across Australia, trying to really sort of leave a bit of a legacy, I suppose, on how I could influence that change from a technology perspective. So, fast forward to where we are today. Braintree has transformed itself from that management consulting company into an executive coaching and leadership company. And we cover the whole world because now technology enables us to do that. As we jumped on our call just now, we were saying, where are we all from? Because you can be from anywhere. And we have webinars, we have people from all over the world. And it's really exciting to have so many different people there. So what do we do there? Well, I guess in a nutshell, what we're doing is coaching executives, as in C-suite, board members, leaders and managers. Okay. And our motto is to break through barriers to reach your true potential.
Okay.
But what's really interesting in terms of this conversation is about a year or so ago, I noticed that there was a massive change that we all really needed to adopt as leaders. And that is about, understanding all of the influences that are playing a big role in society today. And I realized that a lot of leadership programs would really focus on, how do you delegate? How do you communicate? How do you do all the sort of standard types of things that you would as a leader? But there was a really big gap, and it was hurting companies. It was hurting boards. It was hurting C-suites. It was hurting leaders. and that was considering all of the external influences that were changing the landscape of businesses today. So in my day, when I was in the investment banking, we didn't worry about diversity, equity, and inclusion. It was a very male-dominated environment, and I could tell you on another chat over a glass of wine or a coffee, all those sorts of stories. But basically, here we are today dealing with diversity, equity, and inclusion. We're talking about gender equality, closing the gap on pay, creating equal opportunities in the workplace. We're in a moment right now where we've been looking at the Great Resignation, but yet we've got massive skill shortages. And so as an organisation, how are we attracting those talent into our organisation when there's such a shortage of them? Because again, the transition that's happened is that the opportunities for hiring excellent people comes at a price. And that price is that you need to be congruent with that person's purpose and that person's belief system. So when we talk about ESG, environmental sustainability and governance, and we talk about CSR, corporate social responsibility, and I mentioned diversity, equity and inclusion, gender equality, all of those things play a major role in how an employee assesses an employer, as well as the employer assessing the employee. So it's very much a win-win these days and a two-way street. So, what are the sort of things that, have been coming up in regards to that? Well, I suppose when I jump back to the fact that a year ago, I recognised all these things, I created a program that's called a New Age Leadership Program, and it embraces what we're doing today, which is digital platforms. So it's a combination of being able to do a program online and have one-on-one coaching. So we keep the accountability present for people. But one of those modules is touching on exactly these areas that you focus on. And that is, overall, we talk about the future of work. So, the future of work requires employee flexibility. We need to have environments, as I mentioned, that are congruent with their particular values. And, we need to be able to support things like mental health. So the government's Productivity Commission estimates that employers in Australia lose up to $17 billion a year because of absenteeism and poor mental health. But those with a better incident of mental health issues tend to have a better culture, a better mindset. So, how are we adopting those types of mindsets in the organisations? So a lot of those things come from, changes in the workplace. People want flexibility. They want to be able to look at their longer term goals. They want to be in an environment that's supportive for those and for their purpose.
Can I ask you a few questions?
Yeah, please do.
Oh, good. Okay. Yeah. I just want to take you back to when you were doing your investment banking.
Yes.
And I want to bundle a few of the things that you said together and try and get a bit of a deeper understanding of what you said. So you said about you're very keen from an early part in your career about making your own pathway. You worked in you like to work in innovation and choosing career positions that allowed you to innovate. You said you spanned the technology and the business part of the business, and you also were working in an area of high burnout for people. So with all of those things there, carving your own career positioning and innovation positions and so on, what we're noticing is a lot of younger people are choosing to work in environments where they're not going to be subjected to burnout and they're going to get work-life balance. So what can you talk about as far as the younger generation and how they're choosing those sorts of environments, or how that perspective that you gave from your investment banking days would be different today?
Absolutely. Well, major transformations have taken place, clearly. We don't all have to be in the office at 7 o'clock in the morning till 8 o'clock at night. So balance on life is incredibly important. And we all have to take ownership of that. So, there are techniques that you can do to look at how you are balancing those areas to avoid burnout. But I think the other thing is that awareness around our mental health is much more prevalent today than it was before.
Yes.
So we recognise the signs, and organisations also have EAP programs, employee assistant programs, which often will help employees who might be feeling the stress of burnout. There's other things we talked about, those environments and how that's shifted, flexible working hours. I know in the last role I had, I could buy leave or I could take extra leave. So if I needed to have extra time off. So those organizations are now shifting and understanding that they need to provide that sort of environment for this generation. So yeah, definitely. And coming back to your point about, when an employee comes to an organization, what are they looking for? And they will look for those flexible hours. They will look for the opportunity to grow and learn and to have some sort of, some management over how their career evolves. And what's also interesting, I think, talking about that digital transformation that's happening today, where we can work more remotely and flexibly, the generation of today are likely to have several different careers.
Yes.
And in fact, people I'm hiring at the moment are in other roles where they might be working 30 hours a week and they've still got another 10 hours a week that they would like to do something else. So diversification and choice of jobs, I think, is also something that plays a key role in that.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And actually, it's funny how you said, the younger generation now will have several careers. But actually, if you look at your own career, you've had several as well. So not saying that you're not young. So can I talk to you about your time working in Asia? You said you traveled a lot and in Asia. Can you tell me about what was your approach to the different cultures? Because every Asian country has a very different culture and approach to business. So can you talk about your experience with that?
Absolutely, and that's such an important part, an important question, and I'll tell you why. Being based in Australia and running a region for Asia Pacific took a different approach to how you had to develop that business. So what I did was I adopted a model where I had partners in every different country that we had a presence in. So that might have been a system integration sales company. And so we would go, I would go create the relationships across all of those different countries. And then those people would be trained on our product. They were the ones that had the relationships with the clients. They understood the culture in cases where there were language barriers. They bridged all of that. And they were able to coach me on what I needed to do as well to be successful in those environments. Right. So essentially they would do a lot of the lead generation, the qualification of opportunities, and then I would go in and then close those deals. So right. It was very much a leveraging of that partnership, which I think is again really present for today, of ecosystems, networks, all that sort of thing is really an important part of how you establish business on a global scale.
Okay, that's fantastic. Yeah, I think a lot of people don't actually realize how diverse the cultures are in Asia. Asia is not Asia; it's a lot of different countries. So I wanted to ask you also about your experience with the Silicon Valley company. You said, as a short line, you said it had the perfect culture for a startup, right? Yes. Did you remember you said that? So can you describe what the perfect culture is for a startup?
Absolutely. It was a family. In one word, it was a family. One of the things that really stood out for me, and particularly being in a time zone that was remote from everybody else, was the immense support and commitment that was present from everybody. Now, as we all know, culture is really something that comes from the top down. It's like they say, the fish rots from the head. So our CEO embraced every single person that came into that organization. He would be standing there doing the barbecue on a Friday afternoon. And he put, the other thing was that he put operational systems in place that enabled access to information no matter where you were. So for example, we would be doing responding to requests for proposals. That's an incredible amount of work. It could take you 2 weeks time to do a response. We had all of that information at our fingertips because the infrastructure that they had placed in there was able to support that. What they also did was they would get people together regularly. So we developed relationships with all of our colleagues. So it didn't matter what time of day it was. we could pick the phone up and call them and say, hey, I'm with a client, or I need this help. Can you help me? And they were more than willing to help. There was nobody that didn't answer their phone unless they were with a client. They all were there to support. And, apart from it coming from their heart and from the culture and the behavior and the selection of people that were congruent with that culture, what they also did was they enabled every employee to have some level of stock options.
Oh, okay.
So
That's a very American thing now, isn't it?
yes, yeah. And so everybody had that drive, had that hunger for success, because they knew if they helped their fellow colleague, that was helping them as well.
Okay.
So it was just an incredible. It was a family.
So everyone had a stake in the business, right?
Right.
So that's fantastic. So the last thing I want to ask you before Steve sums up is you talked about your phrase was new age leadership, and you've referenced three aspects around that future of work piece: flexibility, values, and mental health. Can you give some advice to some young people who are joining companies and looking for that sort of new age leadership piece? What sort of things should they be looking out for and expecting from a company that is equipped to hire young professionals that are really ambitious?
Absolutely. Great question. When I look at from two sides here, if I look at the leaders and what we talk about as principles for those leaders in that leadership program, I think that equally the employee should be looking at their own principles as well. So if the leader's principles are around openness, transparency, flexibility, a few of those things that I touched on, then equally that employee should be looking at what are my key principles that I want to bring into that organization? What's important to me? And how can I make sure that that organization is congruent with those things? So, it may take a little bit of work. Maybe they work with somebody to understand what those particular values are, their beliefs, and what their principles are before they embark on that. Because,
That's fantastic. I find young people are very switched on about this sort of stuff, and employers that don't engage on that, they don't have a good time, I don't think. So
yes.
Thanks very much for your insight. Steve, do you want to sum it up for us, please?
Yeah, sure. So, Cindy, I'm not sure if I've got a great word for this, but I'm seeing it as sort of seeing reality. And there are a few aspects of this seeing reality that I want to bring out. And firstly is how you see, what are the eyes that you look through when you look out at the world? And you've talked about your own experience and your own eyes that you looked out, and you talked about a positive mindset. You talked about being the master of your own destiny. You talked about having confidence, and not only because you believe in yourself, but because other people believed in you as well. And that gave you that confidence. The right attitude you talked about, if you think you can make it, then you probably can make it. And so there's this sense of mindset, of courage. You talked about that as well, of confidence, of the willingness to embrace risk, not in a foolhardy way, but in an opportunistic way. And so that's how you looked at reality, and that shaped what you saw. And what you saw is the second side of it. And on the one hand, you saw opportunity and the opportunity for innovation. And so you could see that there were opportunities to leverage here. There were places to move into and things to be done. And there were new things to be brought out. There were new things to be created. Reality isn't just what's there. Reality is what can be there if you've got the right vision. So opportunity and innovation. And the other side of it that I got is congruence and culture. And congruence became a big thing. So it's one thing to talk about technology and all of this, but it has to be aligned with the people side of things. Technology can produce opportunities and help us to do things better. But the fact is that people have got needs, people make choices. And you talked about in the new workspace, people are interested in things like diversity, equity, and inclusion. They're interested in gender equality. They're interested in flexibility. They're interested in their mental health. They're interested in the values and the principles that they see within a company and that they see within themselves. And so there needs to be this meshing, this coming together. We can't just rely on technology. We need to take the people side of it into account as well. And the culture, you talked about the Silicon Valley experience and what you've created in your own business, where it's a family, where it's there to support, where people are invested and people are benefiting mutually and sharing in the benefits. And so that creates this healthy, supportive culture, which in turn helps to create the congruence. And so it becomes a holistic thing.
Yeah, absolutely. You've hit the nail on the head. Yeah, there's a lot of points in there, but yeah, I think you've absolutely hit the nail on the head. And I think it's really about what is the art of the possible. What is the future? Embrace it. Don't be afraid. Talked about those sorts of things. A lot of people don't really know how to step into those spaces, but you know what? When they're new, nobody else has done it before anyway. So right. What have you got to lose? I always ask myself, what's the worst thing that can happen?
Yeah.
Hey, thanks very much for coming on our podcast today, Cindy. A lot of energy and a lot of experience there. So thank you for sharing. I appreciate it.
Been an absolute pleasure. Thanks ever so much again for inviting me.
Thanks for watching this video on Humanised Workforce Future You. Please leave a rating or review for the series on the medium where you source your videos.
The transcripts for today's video can be found on craigsafin.com. Please subscribe to the series to avoid missing out on future episodes.